In this video, I'm going to share a really practical approach to using the STAR method to help you level up your responses to behavioral questions for your next job interview. Now, you might already be familiar with the STAR method and understand that the S stands for situation, the T stands for task or topic, we'll come back to that, A is for actions, and the R is for results. Now, just quickly on the T for task or topic. A task is something fairly straightforward. A topic might be something more like leadership or professionalism. So we're going to follow those steps as we deliver our response to the question. Now, the interviewer will ask a question that relates to one of the core competencies required for the position that you're applying for. Now, when you hear the question, you need to identify which of your past experiences you can draw on to help demonstrate to the interviewer that you have those skills or qualities that they're asking about in the question. When you've identified that, you can then start to explain the circumstances or the situation of the experience that you have in mind. We also need to then focus in specifically on what the task was, or maybe the topic if they're asking for an example of leadership or integrity or something like that, that's more of a value rather than a hard skill. Now, as you're explaining this situation and focusing in on the task, you need to be mindful of any flavour or language that might appear in the question. So let me explain what I mean by that. The core competency may be around your ability to make decisions. So the question could start with, when have you had to make an important decision? And there'll be more to the question. The more to the question can be the flavour or the language of that question. So for example, it may be, when have you had to make an important decision under pressure, or within a short time frame, maybe within limited resources or information, or where the decision has the potential to create a conflict of interest. So when we look at the question, the core competency, the skill that they want evidence of, is your ability to make a decision, but there may be language or flavour to the question that you also need to be mindful of, because we need to incorporate this flavour or this language in our response to this question about decision making. Now, while we're focusing on the core competency and we're mindful of any flavour that we need to incorporate in our response, we need to be careful here at the beginning not to get bogged down on explaining the circumstances. The situation and the topic should only take up about 20% of your entire answer. So give the interviewer enough information so that they have some context, but we don't need to go into great detail just yet. We save that for the next step, which is when we start to explain the actions that we've taken in the particular situation that you're sharing. Now, this is the most important part of your answer, because it's here that you explain the actions you took, and it's the actions that provide evidence of your ability in relation to the core competency. Now, when you're explaining what actions you've taken, think about explaining multiple steps. Is there more than one thing that you did that provides evidence? There may have been 2 or 3 or 4 individual elements or actions that you took that each individually provide evidence of your ability as far as the core competency is concerned. And it's the combination of all of those actions that we hope will provide enough evidence to prove your case, to prove that you have the skills required for the position. Now, given that this is where the evidence comes from, it's got to be evidence that specifically relates to the core competency. So be careful not to be sidetracked about other qualities that you might like to include that are not really relevant to what the interviewer is asking for. Now, given that it's this part of your answer where you're providing evidence, we should be spending the majority of our time here explaining what actions you've taken. So about 70% of the answer should be spent here. So we've explained the circumstances to give some context. Now we're trying to provide evidence of our skills or abilities. When we've done that, it's time to move on to explain the result of the situation. Now, to explain to the interviewer what happened at the end of the situation should only take the last 10%. So we don't want to get bogged down here either, spending too much time talking about what happened in the end. But to round things off for your answer, there's a couple of approaches that you can take. The first is to think about using what I call a link back. And that is to briefly explain that the result was quite positive and that you believe it was due to the actions that you took that created such a positive result. For example, you might say, I think if I'd taken different steps or different actions to deal with that situation, we may not have had the same positive result. So we're linking back to the evidence to try to reinforce that what you did was very positive and created that good outcome. The other option is to think about explaining what you learned from the situation. So you may have identified a couple of things that were valuable to you from that experience. You may like to share those valuable lessons with the interviewer. Now, it won't take long to get comfortable with the flow of the STAR method, and as you get more comfortable with it, you'll realize there's really only 3 basic steps involved. And that is to give some context, explain what you did, and then explain the outcome. So whether you're using the STAR method framework or others such as PAS, problem, action, solution, SAO, situation, actions, outcome, or CAR, circumstances, actions, result, it's really all the same thing. You'll notice that it begins by giving some context, then focusing on what actions were taken, and then of course wrapping the answer up by talking about the solution, the outcome, or the result of the situation. Use your own words, but follow that structure when you're answering behavioural evidence questions in your next job interview, and you give yourself the best chance of impressing the interviewer.